It's summer, and without assignments and tests to keep you busy, it's always nice to spend some time watching a good movie. I wanted to choose a random movie to talk about, so I did what any person would do. Go to a random year generator website, spin for a year, and watch some movies. The year I got was 1998.
The first runner-up in the 1998 Miss Universe pageant is Miss Venezuela, Miss Universe 1998, Miss Trinidad and Tobago.
The year is 1998. Singing groups like the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Destiny's Child, and the Spice Girls are taking the world by storm. Our favorite search engine, Google, was created, and Michael Jordan brought another championship home to Chicago. I probably forgot some important moments, but hey, I wasn't alive yet. I can only tell you so much. The 90s were defined by romantic comedies and horror films, seeing movies like Clueless and Scream have unparalleled success. In this video, I decided to talk about 1998 slasher film, Urban Legend. The film follows murders happening on a college campus in New England, modeled after urban legends. Now, slasher films were extremely popular in this time period, and while it wasn't the best, it's definitely worth talking about. The horror genre, specifically one of its subgenres, slasher films, is rather expansive, exploring topics such as gender, sexuality, and morality, varying in narrative structures and twists. Urban legend depicts the multiple strand narrative, as the urban legends affect an ensemble of characters and view their last moments in their perspectives. Michael J. Koven writes, in Film, Folklore, and Urban Legends, urban legend is the most obvious example of multiple fusion narratives, films that fuse together a number of legend texts through either ostension or dialogue. In the movie, undergraduate student Natalie, Alicia Witt, is terrorized by a psycho killer using urban legends as modus operandi. That is, the film uses ostensive embedded narratives as a murder device in a horror film. The cast had already begun to make a name for themselves with Jared Leto, Alicia Witt, Tara Reid, Joshua Jackson, and Rebecca Gayheart. The behind the scenes had a breakdown of the characters, and I liked what was said about Damon, played by Joshua Jackson.
Practical Joker is played by Dawson's Creek co-star Joshua Jackson.
Damon falls in, well, he's the comic relief. He's a bit of a red herring, you know, the guy you're like not too sure about. You want to trust him, but there's something just a little bit off about him.
In addition, they had an established veteran actor in the genre, Robert Englund, and acclaimed theater actress, Loretta Devine, play important roles in the movie. This movie has its own final girl with Natalie, which was common to see in 90s slashers. The final girl trope is depicted as the image of a distressed female most likely to linger in memory is the image of the one who did not die, the survivor or final girl. She's the one who encounters the mutilated bodies of her friends and perceives the full extent of the preceding horror and of her own peril. Who is chased, cornered, wounded, whom we see scream, stagger, fall, rise, and scream again. She is abject terror personified. If her friends knew they were about to die only seconds before the event, the final girl lives with the knowledge for long minutes or hours. She alone looks death in the face, but she alone also finds the strength either to stay the killer long enough to be rescued, ending A, or to kill him herself, ending B. Now that the stage is set, let's get into the movie. The movie starts off with a murderous beginning as Michelle is killed within the first few minutes, decapitated in the backseat of her car. Michelle is shown singing along to turn around, and her death could have been prevented with the man at the gas station, trying to warn her that someone was in her car. It jumps to the retelling of a student massacre in Stanley Hall, with Natalie hearing the story along with her friends Brenda and Sasha, who's dating the narrator, Parker. Parker talks about how a guy flipped out, grabbed a hunting knife, and banged on the door of students. Paul, an inspiring journalist, interrupts to clarify the story, and the massacre results in the guy killing the entire floor before killing himself. This story was a segue to announce that Parker's frat throws a party to celebrate the anniversary. The movie revolves around us, the audience, being explained each legend by the characters. But one of the first legends that isn't told to us is Bloody Mary. We see Natalie and Brenda recite Bloody Mary multiple times outside of Stanley Hall. They eventually get scared by Damon, another friend of the group. The lecture in class from Professor Wexler is pivotal in the movie, but also to Damon's fate. He opens with the Called Inside Your House story, explaining how urban legends are contemporary folklore passed on as a true story. He clarifies that Mikey from the Life brand cereal commercial didn't die from eating Pop Rocks with Coke. To prove this misconception, he has Natalie test it out. She's reluctant, and Damon does it instead. There was a reference in the film to The Boy Who Cried Wolf, and that applies to Damon, because when he does die later on, it isn't taken seriously. His death recreates the guy and girl parked in the woods, starting off innocent with Damon coming off as a jerk.
Those are the type of problems that only a man can fix.
And I suppose you're that man.
You know it.
Nice try, Damon. That was a fairly good impersonation of a human being.
Sadly, once separated from Natalie, he ends up getting hung on a tree, which the sequence of events remains one of the best murders in the film. It's evident while watching how the movie parallels an urban legend, with the school wanting to cover up / ignore the murders, resulting in it being hearsay and the mysterious disappearances never being resolved. When Michelle dies, the dean is trying to tune out the news, and with only one death, he can. But as more bodies turn up, it becomes harder to ignore.
What are you trying to say, Natalie?
It's like someone out there is taking all these stories and making them reality.
The school thinks Damon is just taking a vacation, and Natalie's roommate Tosh dies on school grounds. The police refuse to rule it as a homicide, and that moment seems to change Natalie since she was in the room and didn't know anything happened. Natalie is left a haunting message the next morning and is a drawback to the "aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights" legend. The multiple red herrings take away from the film and make it messy at times, like when multiple people have the black winter coat and axe. Paul is the main suspect to the audience as he can be rather suspicious. He works with Natalie to figure out the killer. And you know what they say, keep your friends close and enemies closer. They investigate the Stanley Hall massacre with the janitor's help and realize the only survivor was Professor Wexler. Later on, Parker exposes Paul at the party, establishing a motive for him being the killer. Natalie believes the killer is Paul at one point near the end because Professor Wexler's body is found in the trunk of his car. Halfway in the movie, we find out that Natalie was friends with the girl that died at the beginning of the movie, Michelle, back in high school. The two were doing the car lights initiation legend and killed someone. The legend is referenced 3 times. First with Sasha telling Natalie about it in the library, to Natalie confessing her crime to Brenda later on, and finally being the reason behind the janitor's death when he saves Natalie from running away. Brenda being the killer was a nice twist, as the guy Natalie and Michelle killed was Brenda's fiancé.
Wexler!
You're
Professor does away with his students, then kills himself in the same manner as the course he teaches. It's beautiful. It's so fucking clean, isn't it?
After catching Natalie and Paul kiss, this begins Brenda's killing spree. She kills Dean Adams, Professor Wexler, Parker, and Sasha. Parker is murdered by the Pop Rocks urban legend substituting the coke with bleach.
She traces them back. They're coming from inside the house, right? But Asswave, aren't you forgetting something? I'm not babysitting any kids.
Wrong legend. This is the one about the old lady who dries her wet dog in the microwave.
Her death is foreshadowed at the party when the song Love Roller Coaster plays, as the screams are on air.
Hey, listen. That scream? That's an actual cry for help by a girl being murdered.
You're kidding me.
No.
Brenda is avenging her boyfriend's death by using the way her boyfriend died as a reason to kill others. Brenda tries to do the kidney heist on Natalie, which is the only legend Brenda explained in the movie, with a girl picking up a boy at a bar, taking him back to the hotel, knocking him out, and he wakes up in ice with his kidney gone. She even admits that it's all hearsay, exposing the nature of the urban legend by making it true when committing the act. After we find out Brenda was the killer, it went on longer than I would have liked, with Reese finding Natalie and Brenda and a wrestle for the gun. Brenda has another speech after getting the gun, picturing the perfect life for herself, wanting to live and not sacrifice herself to continue the tale.
Bullet through the head. Not exactly an urban legend, but in the essence of time.
It's not gonna bring him back, Brenda. None of
I know that, Natalie. But it will bring a devastated little Paul right into my arms. I'll have him, and he'll have his Pulitzer.
Natalie eventually gets the gun when Paul is found alive, and Brenda falls out the window. Brenda and Paul are driving back, relieved to escape Brenda, but she ends up popping up in the back seat.
Isn't there another story about a guy with an axe hiding in a woman's back seat?
Hello. My mom still checks the back seat before getting into a car.
Brenda tries to axe them, but she fails and falls into the water. The movie ends like it started. The students are talking on the couch, telling the story of the urban legend killer. But instead of having one person tell the story and everyone believe it, Brenda interjects that they're telling it wrong and tells it right, or her version of the truth. This ending can be paradoxical, like Paul with the Hall Massacre, to verbalize the truth, or that this entire movie is a matter of what if, and the story in itself is an urban legend. Now, every character serves a purpose, and before I didn't see Sasha and Parker beyond their cliche, but they have depth to them that's important to the storytelling in the movie.
Here's Sasha and Parker.
Sasha's great. She is so much fun. She is just like full of so much energy, and she's smart, and she has her own radio talk show, and she's really into her talk show. She's very sexual. She loves sex. She loves talking about sex. She loves anything that has to do with sex. That's why she likes Parker so much.
Parker, how exactly does Sasha come up with this stuff?
She devours every issue of Cosmo, calls it her Bible.
Parker wants to have a good time. Parker's about life. Parker's about storytelling, scaring people. Parker's about just being there and relishing the moment.
Don't you guys get what's going on here? Just like the urban legend.
I liked what Koven had to say about them. In particular, two characters are the focus of the legend tellings. Sasha, who as a regular section of her seemingly endless radio show, has her listeners phone in. It is these listeners who related to the legend text. Interestingly, these stories, although they're represented to us as dialogic embedded narratives within the diegetic world of urban legend, are off-screen, ostensive embedded narratives. Her callers have actually replaced roommates' birth control pills with baby aspirin, have been the promiscuous cheerleader, and have phoned in while stuck in a new sexual position.
Ingestion of bodily fluids is a major safe sex no-no. Really? Suggestion is that use down a couple shots of Pepto, and next time, get away from the volcano before it erupts.
The other focus on dialogic embedded narratives within the film is the character Parker, who relates the university cover-up of campus murder, the spider eggs and bubble yum, the Richard Gere and the gerbil, and the babysitter and the man upstairs stories. In all these cases, Parker tells these stories with great pleasure, both debunking the belief in them and just relishing a good and grisly tale. The positioning of Parker as debunker also parallels him with Professor Wexler, who not only retells the babysitter and the man upstairs story as part of his folklore lecture, but is equally concerned with debunking wrong beliefs. Both characters suffered tragic fates, but were more than comedic relief after Damon dies early in the movie. They were what kept the movie grounded, with giving information not only to the audience, but the characters as well. They set the pace, and influenced who we wanted to believe and who to trust. They were, in one way or another, narrators of the story. As a college student, this movie appealed to me because of the vulnerability the students on campus face. In college, you can be miles away from your friends and family, and even though you're an adult, you still rely on professors and administrators to keep you safe. Urban legend has its flaws, especially when you compare it to other slasher films like Scream and The Faculty, but I can't help but praise how fun this movie is. I want to close with a quote about the horror genre, as someone that has a new appreciation for it. The pleasure derived from horror fiction and the source of our interest in it resides. First and foremost, in the processes of discovery, proof, and confirmation, the disclosure of the existence of the horrific being and of its properties is the central source of pleasure in the genre. Once that process of revelation is consummated, we remain inquisitive about whether such a creature can be successfully confronted. And that narrative question sees us through to the end of the story.